we mentioned Twitter already, and that's clearly a part of what Stellate does and supports these scientists in communicating. And you kind of got your following. Am I right in that it kind of all started on Twitter in a way? How did that come about? Like, how did you build your following? And I think we were both attending SFN. That's, I think, how I initially started following you, was through this community of neuroscientists. Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, so I was wrapping up my undergraduate lab work. I finished at the University of Michigan and stayed on for another year to finish some work. And I think one of my undergraduate students that I was mentoring at the time was like, you need to get on Twitter. Like, people are talking about science. And I was like, oh, okay. So when I made that transition to start my graduate work at MIT, started following like the professors who were online, my mentor at the time, I pretty quickly found that it was useful because there was important conversations happening about science and the field directly related to me, and it was people were sharing papers and resources and providing support for one another. I more or less for my first year just listened, didn't really participate. And then later, I stumbled on graduate students like myself. And MIT is a little bit scary place to be a graduate student. I definitely didn't fit the typical mold. I had a psychology background, not a hardcore sciences background. Like, I was on the wait list. I didn't even get in right away. So I had a lot of like imposter syndrome about being there and being with all these brilliant people. And I kind of started tweeting about it and saw that other people were tweeting about it. And I was like, wow, there's like this whole network of other graduate students who also don't know what they're doing. Like, and realistically, no one knows what they're doing. But, being in the cohort that I was in, I was like, wow, all of these people have, their science figured out. Like this, like, I am not that person. So I think in that way, I really started building a community there with other graduate students who were outside of my institution. And honestly, it's in many ways one of the most valuable things that I've done during my PhD. One, just having that support and community. I could have been in the lab at 10 p.m. and tweeted something, oh, my experiment failed, like, please send cute dog pics. And I would receive, 30 cute dog pics. And like, being able to chat about like the struggles of graduate school was really, really helpful for me. And then, on the other side, it kind of transitioned into, which I didn't know at the time, what my career would actually end up being, working in digital and social to build thought leadership. So even though that wasn't the goal at the time, it certainly was the beginning of a career in communications.
Wow. And as far as your following, would you say that your level of engagement and being able to kind of connect with these other scientists was a part of how you built that following?
I think social media is social, and this is what I tell everybody. Like, it's about two-way engagement and being consistent, and it's similar to building a new friendship. You can't just be really active and then completely ghost for 3 months and then come back and be like, hey, listen to me. There's some rules of engagement, and so those are on the more basic level. But I also think that I became really open about the struggles that I experienced in grad school, and was talking about mental health and the impact of academia on my mental health. Maybe a little, like, before it was fashionable, and that said, it's not an important topic, but now it's a very obvious conversation that is happening continually, which is amazing. So I think that people really connected with that. Like, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people in academia struggle with their mental health because of the extreme pressures that exist there. So yeah, I kept it pretty real. I talked about the struggles and, celebrated the wins. And I think I just was really open about what my life was during that time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's such a common experience, and it's something, for myself as a mentor for people going into graduate school, I try to be really upfront with them about how
Yeah,
hard of a time it was for me, and the fact that it's going to be a long haul. You don't
yeah,
know when it's going to be over. You're likely going to be living in a city and not making, a living wage,
yeah,
which I think is a big part of it. And yeah, it definitely for me was some of the hardest years of my life that I just, at one point, I thought about taking time off. I thought about,
yeah,
stepping away from the bench. And eventually I was just like, all right, I'm just going to try to buckle down and get through this,
yeah,
and finish as quickly as possible, because I just can't remain in this state
yeah,
of
yeah,
my life. Like that's how I felt about it. So I commend you on being open about your experiences online, because I think that can be a really scary thing. And a lot of times, um, there's this perception of, oh, I can't talk about certain things because that's going to impact the view of myself as a professional in the world or
yeah.
whatever. Like I've posted tweets where I've had mentors say, "Hey, maybe you should take that down." you know.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
think we've all been there. And I think it's a really great point that, there is a fine line. I do use Twitter as a professional network, as I think most scientists do. But you if you look at the metrics at people who are looking or seeing at your tweets, it's a lot greater than you would anticipate. And so, I would caution people to think twice about, posts that they put online, that if it's a network that they use, semi-professionally. I've definitely experienced the same thing, experienced backlash. Like there are downsides to social media. And I think that people need to set goals and boundaries for themselves when there's people who could make career decisions seeing their content.
Absolutely. So I want to touch on one question just out of curiosity, because lately, as part of the podcast and promoting things myself on these different platforms, there's been a lot of discussion around Twitter being this kind of toxic environment.
Mm,
And I'm just curious for your thoughts. Like, do you ever feel like you need to take a break from these social media platforms because they become this kind of intense space? Has that
yeah,
been your experience at all?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think on the net, as I mentioned, Twitter has been, a tremendous community for me. And there's been a lot of support there. But obviously, it's not like LinkedIn where it's connected to your name. There are suits and, pretty big suits in the science space. And, I've had run ins with a couple of them kind of bullying me a little bit. And that was really, as a young graduate student, and like being kind of publicly dragged in some ways, like really difficult to deal with. And so I think
Can we pause? What's a sued?
a pseudonym, sorry.
Okay.
So like early Twitter, like science Twitter, there's a number of pseudonyms of people that, like, PIs that operate under names that are not their own.
Okay.
And a lot of them had like blogs that were like very early, like maybe, I don't know, a decade ago. And that makes me feel old, but like, when blogs were a little bit more fashionable than they are
Right.
now. And so people that just operated under a different name. Does that make sense?
Right. But and are you referring to some of these scientists, which I think I kind of know what you're talking about now, where they often could be very critical of
Yeah.
different people's science and kind of ripping them apart a little bit online.
Yeah, and it could be the science or, I think I remember once I tweeted something about reverse light dark cycle, and for people who work with rodents know that, and just talking about, I don't even remember what it was, doing some experiment and reverse light dark cycle, and they wrote like an entire blog post about like why behaviorists don't really know what they're doing and this new crop of. So it was just like, it didn't directly mention me, but you knew that it was connected in some way. And there's a
Yeah.
couple instances where something that I would say would, you know, snowball into a whole nother conversation that wasn't the intention, but that is how social media works. Like, that does happen. People subtweet, each other at times. And I don't love that part of, social media. And I think there are pockets of good communities on Twitter. And I like to think that neuroscience and the science community is one of those, but you got to protect it. So,
Yeah.
I always tell people the number one rule for, engaging on social media professionally is don't be an asshole.
I like that.
There's
Yeah.
spaces, and academia is hard enough. We don't need people being an asshole.
And I mean, I feel like I have to push back. I mean, I've felt this way probably since graduate school of like putting that positivity out into the world
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much criticism and we're trained to be critical thinkers, right?
Right.
Like, our committees are founded on this idea that they're going to like really be hard on this graduate student while they're going
Yeah.
through this experience, which was certainly my experience.
Yeah.
And I think it can be a lot. And like, why shouldn't we be positive about each other's work and really,
Totally.
acknowledge and celebrate the work that we're impressed by? I think that's an important kind of part of.
Absolutely. And I think because like Twitter is a space where there's so much open dialogue that people see it as like a level playing field, when in reality it's still not, right? If you're a second year graduate student and you tweet something about either science or life as a scientist, and you have this super famous scientist like, give a snarky remark, like that can do tremendous damage to, a young scientist's, perception of themselves and their science. And I think that, a little bit more thought to like that kind of dynamic is needed.